Hey YouTube, it's your beekeeper here. This is our Saturday morning mental health project to try to put a lousy week behind me and just kind of clear my head a little bit, use some creative juices here. I'm building an outdoor fireplace slash cooktop wood burning stove. I know I can speak. And I'm using an old air compressor tank. I start cutting with a friction disc and find out that that disc gets disintegrated really quickly, and then I'm dilly-dallying around with the sawzall, burning this blade up pretty hot, and then realize that I'm cutting through high-strength steel, but I'm not that smart. It takes me a little while to realize it. But what we're doing is this is an air tank off an old Ingersoll Rand air compressor that I bought when I was about 19 years old from a store called Pay and Pack out here on the West Coast. And look at all the dirt that's inside the tank, and it's totally my fault. I should have drained the air out of this tank more often than I did, apparently. And there's the rusty bottom of the tank. I did try to weld it a couple years ago, put some epoxy on there, but I've never ever had good luck welding pinhole leaks in an air tank. You're just chasing thin metal, and look at all that dirt. So I bought this thing when I was 19 or 20 years old, so it makes it about 30 years old. About 12 or 13 years ago, I brought it up to El Rancho to use, and it worked good till a few years ago when it sprung a leak. But everything else on this thing works well. So I had picked up an air tank free off of Craigslist and was going to swap all the hardware over to the new tank, but ended up not doing that and getting a 220, bigger 220 compressor. But I may reassemble all this at one point in time. I brought this home on my last trip up to the ranch when I brought that steel beam up there, and just wanted a project where I didn't have to use a measuring tape. I didn't want to overthink things. I just wanted to build stuff with stuff out of my hoard because I just want to reduce the volume of crap I have around my house. I'll be honest with you. So I finally remember here that I got this real nice plasma cutter that I bought a few years ago, and I really should have started out with the plasma cutter. I don't know why I didn't. It didn't dawn on me to use it. Um, but this thing just rips right through this tank, easy peasy. And yeah, so I don't use, I'm not getting overcomplicated. My brain loves overcomplicating things. I love trying to be clever and creative and do something that's, I'm going to lathe these pin hinges, this, that. No, no, no. I'm not doing this. Is an outdoor fireplace. I want to take this camping with me when I take that little trailer out so I can have a fire in the evening and be able to warm up some food, warm up a cup of coffee or some tea or something. And also be able to use it in my backyard because it's been a while since I've had an outdoor fireplace, and I do miss that. Just hanging out in the backyard, in the dark with the dog, having a beer, and being warm by a fire. But the plasma cutter worked like a champ. I really do like that machine, and I should have started with it. But what are you going to do? That's a piece of 3-inch exhaust pipe that I had up at the ranch. Yeah, everything here is brought out of the hoard and used, which is awesome. I do grind a little bit of this C channel, a little bit of the rust off, but I mean, I'll be completely honest with you guys. I burned through a lot of metal and a lot of rust, and I didn't make it perfectly clean because I didn't want to OCD over it. So that, the way that's cut out and the size of that allows this channel, and you see on the end of that C channel, I welded some flat steel. The flat steel that I welded on the end of the channel to box it in is actually one of the tank brackets that I cut off. It's the bracket that held the wheels in. I just hammered it flat with a sledgehammer, and it was perfect size. So I used it. And I was able to get this C channel to fit nice and tight to the tank. So welding it was really easy. There was very little bridging. There was like a very small amount of bridging I had to do in one corner. But for the most part, it was in direct contact with the tank. So the welding went pretty easy. I'm using 030 inner shield. That's a 105 amp Century wire feed welder. I've got it on high temperature, so it's like the highest amperage and fairly fast wire speed because it was eating up that 035 pretty quickly. Because all this is pretty thick steel that was very tolerant. I did stitch it in there. I was considering doing just one single pass, but I've never had good luck with that. Something always heats and bends and twists. So here I am just going all the way around this cooktop. And surprisingly enough, it actually is nice and tight because I've had 2 or 3 fires in it already as of this recording, and I don't have any leakage. It's no good to have the linkage. I do like this Ingersoll Rand, and if I had been more on top of my game and drained the tank more frequently, it probably would not have rotted out. But that sure is a lot of dirt that was in the tank. Yikes. So now the stack is welded in. Top plate is welded in. That top plate is thick too. It's like 3/8 steel. So it's nice. This thing's pretty stout. So I'm going to cut off the old motor plate and I'm going to save it because the new tank that I got had different mounting holes and everything. And this way I don't have to even think about it. I can just drop that plate on the new tank, tack it in place, and bolt all the hardware back on it. I did nick the tank a little bit with the Sawzall when I was cutting that mount off. It wandered a little bit because the tank was hot, or the blade was hot, excuse me. And my OCD brain there won't. I just didn't want the thin spots in the tank. I probably didn't need to fill it in, but I did anyway. It's totally probably overkill. So we're looking at what was once the top of the tank, which is now going to be the bottom, and the air inlet control is what I'm building here. And this is where the compressor actually pumped air into the tank. So it's about 1.25 inches, and here I've got it, just a disc I had, and it was already cut into a disc, perfect size. Carriage bolt with a spring, piece of dowel, steel dowel for the little arm to open and close it. And that's how it's shaken out. Now we're going to kind of measure out the door for this thing. I did use a speedy square, and the only reason I did that, oh yes, right, I was going to use these legs. These legs are off an old utility sink. They had been sitting out in the yard too long, and they were exposed to the weather, and they were super rusty, so they went in the trash. And I ended up using this Unistrut. I couldn't decide on the legs, and I finally told myself to stop obsessing over it, and I had some 1/2 inch all thread, and I used 1/2 inch all thread for the legs, and they're fine for right now. I'll come up with something else for the legs down the road. I don't want to roll with those things because I have a feeling they'll bend, especially if I throw it in the back of the truck and take it camping with me, so I can enjoy a little heat outside of that little camping trailer. But for now, they're fine, and I'll come up with something. I've got plenty of pipe. I might do like a 1/2 inch pipe legs, or I'll figure something out. I wanted to kind of figure out the height, which I like the height. Here I'm using a fine precision tool to make sure the door is mostly square, which is funny because I just freehand cut it with the plasma cutter anyway. Again, not wanting to overcomplicate this guy. Just wanted to be able to weld and cut and grind and be left alone. And I made a rookie mistake. Look at that. Whenever you do cut a door in something like this, it's really your best bet to cut 3 sides, attach the hinge, and then cut the lock side. But I got so happy with that plasma cutter because it was cutting so well. I ended up cutting the entire plate off. And then now I've got to dilly-dally around with trying to hold it in place, keep it square, and as well as fabricate a hinge because I'm fabricating a hinge from scratch. And the hinge is a little bit tricky because I'm on the end cap of this tank, which is domed. It's not flat. So you don't want your hinge to extend too far past center on that door, otherwise it'll bind on itself. But you also want to be able to provide stability for the door. And I ended up coming up with this pipe and the dowel, and I used 4 segments, so 2 on the door, 2 on the tank. And I'm just doing some fine-tune adjustments there, but I'm never good at tacking. I either over-weld things or I under-weld things, and you'll see it all falls apart here in a minute because, well, apparently I under-welded it. Welded it. Derp. But it works. And all said and done, it works. Watch. Ready? Oop. Yeah, nice job, buddy. Okay, there we go. Now we got them all. And it's funny that I take the time to wire scrub all these welds because it's just going to get burned. Ultimately, it'll get stripped and sprayed out a flat black. Yeah, there's the door lock. Simple flat bracket that I had in inventory. Once again, I bought nothing for this other than the weld wire that I used, 1 friction disc, and the electricity to weld it. I was going to include the first fire up, but that video footage is probably another 8 or 9 minutes, and I didn't want to make this video too long. There is some air leakage around the door, but it's all right. It's an outdoor fireplace. I'm not tripping, and I didn't want to build the framework around the door or the opening. It works fine. It works great. Look, the air vent. Ooh, buddy. Yes. Yes. So it was fun. I've got about 3.5 hours into this project, and then I had other things to do on Saturday. but it's the opportunity to use stuff out of my hoard. So stay tuned for the next video. Appreciate you guys watching. Gotta go, gotta run. See ya!